Good evening, viewers. Today we have another episode of Guest with Nazir, and when we came across different things in life, the most important thing is how we deal with it. If you have any legal proposition, obviously you need to go to a lawyer, and we are lucky enough today we have a studio guest, Mr. Rashid Majid. He's a solicitor and have a wealth of experience. Welcome to my show.
Good evening.
Thank you very much. So tell us about your early days, from where you started your early education and how you decided to join this profession.
Well, I was born in Nottingham and my parents came over in the 60s, so I was educated in the comprehensive school system and did all right there. And then I think it was around about 16 years of age where I felt I wanted to go into law. Was okay in maths, not great. Initially I wanted to be a mechanic, but I did some work experience through school at a local tyre place and I thought manual labour is not the right thing for me. So I enjoyed law, used to watch a lot of programmes, so I decided that I was going to pursue a career in law, started to do my A-levels and things then developed from there. I moved on, did a degree in Birmingham, and after successfully completing my degree I then came back and did my solicitor's finals course in Nottingham. I then worked for a period of time at the Nottingham Law Centre.
I see.
Yes, so helped people with welfare benefits and immigration advice. Worked for a short period of time also at the organisation called Shelter, which helps the homeless. So from there built up a bit of experience and then eventually moved to Bradford where I got a training contract.
So what is your present role and what is your duties in your present role?
I am a senior director at Khan Solicitors. We have two offices. One office is in Bradford and another office is in Sheffield, which we've had since 2010. I mainly deal with criminal defence work and I've been really dealing with criminal defence work for the last 20 years.
I see. So you have seen profession from working in a volunteer organization and then as a business, how you see in the different passages of the time, how you see the profession as progress?
Yeah, I think everything seems to go a lot more faster. I mean, whilst I was working at the Shelter and the Law Centre, I think things were much more relaxed. But then again, I wasn't a full-time paid employee. I was assisting other people. But I think when you get into private practice, I think there's a lot more pressures. That's my personal opinion anyway. And yeah, things are tough, but you have to go with the flow, as they say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
If somebody gets a ticket, especially from the supermarket cameras, so what is the solution and how it works?
Well, if you're parking on a supermarket car park, then that's private land. It's normally private land. It's not owned by the local authority. Now, if the supermarket is part of the British Parking Association, then you can, obviously, if you accept that you were wrong, for example, to park there, for example, you may have parked for something else and you've just parked in the car park, then there is an appeals process. But what's important to bear in mind, Mr. Nazir, is that some organisations aren't members of the British Parking Association. And therefore, the fact they issue you a ticket doesn't necessarily mean that they will, you've got a right of appeal, because it's just a normal contract. They've issued you a ticket and you then have to make a decision as to what you want to do. Normally, I'm sure you're aware, it's members of the council or the police that issue with tickets. So I think the first thing you would have to do is, do you accept responsibility? If you don't accept responsibility, then is this private organisation registered with the British Parking Association? If it isn't, then it's a simple case. They'll write you letters and you can dispute that if you want to. And if they want to take that further, they can take the matter to court. However, if they are registered with the British Parking Association, then there is a right of appeal, which you can make representation initially to the supermarket. If they reject them, then you want to take things further, then you can appeal to the parking appeals, and then they will decide what to do. If it's in your favour, not a problem. If that appeal goes against you, then you are liable, and the supermarket or any other private organisation can take matters further by enforcing or taking the matter to court, which obviously have serious consequences and obviously involves extra costs. So it's really a judgment you have to make, and it might be best taking legal advice at that stage.
Every matter, especially when it's linked with law or any professional issue, there is always importance that you seek independent legal advice. We move forward. I have an interesting proposition for you. If somebody is doing a shopping in a shopping center or in a supermarket, and somebody is accompanied with a little child, 3 or 4 years old, and children have some habit, they pick up the things and they play with it. And in this scenario, if somebody's child pick up an item from a shopping center and put in a bag, because bags are open like in these big bags, and they come out of the shop, and of course the supermarket or the shopkeeper will try to stop them that somebody has taken it. So the consequences could be very, very serious. So what are the defenses for that family whose kids have picked up this item in error, or because they are children, they picked up? The parents have nothing to do with it, but parents could be responsible for this.
Well, if the allegation is one of theft, and for theft, one of the most important ingredients of an offence is dishonesty. Clearly, this is a scenario where a child probably doesn't understand the difference between right and wrong in law in any event, has put something in a bag or something. If you are detained in that position, you would do then obviously can try to explain this to the security officers. However, if the position was this, that you were arrested, then and were taken to a police station, then I think the first thing any lawyer, well, you should get a lawyer, and I think the first thing any lawyer would do would speak to the police officers and find out what evidence there is, because you've got to not only have a dishonest intention, but you must have also committed the offence, and if there is no evidence that anybody's seen you putting an item in your bag, then it's going to be very difficult. And then in those normal situations, if I was there representing that person, I'd speak to the officers, see what evidence they've got, and if this is the explanation given by my client, I would then advise them to give their version of events. Once they give their version of events, then the police normally have a number of choices. They can release without charge. They can charge, although I would see it's very difficult to charge in those circumstances unless there's specific evidence that they've seen my client actually put that in item in the bag, or they can bail pending further inquiries. But at that stage, I would make representations to the police and say, look, a child's done this, is it really worth pursuing? And without having any evidence of that adult putting the items in the bag, it would be very difficult for the prosecution to prove their case.
Thank you. We move forward. If somebody is being stopped without any reason by the police, can somebody challenge this stop and search procedure or no?
Are we talking about a general stop and search or in a car?
In a car, especially in a car.
In a car, generally, the police have got wide-ranging powers to stop anybody, and normally when they do stop somebody, they will normally ask you for your name and address, and also who's the owner of the car, and any other inquiries about insurance or MOT. I would advise anybody, because the police have got general wide-ranging powers, that you do answer their questions, because if you don't answer their questions, you could be arrested for and charged with an offence of obstructing a police officer in the execution of their duty. Officers ought really only to stop somebody if they have got reasonable grounds for believing an offence has been committed. And these days, normally police officers will stop somebody if somebody's speeded or gone through a red traffic light or something worse than that. But really, you ought to cooperate. If you're not happy with the conduct of a police officer, then you've always got the right to make a complaint against them.
Thank you. So, is there any checks on this police powers, especially for the stop and search?
Stop and search actually is quite topical at the moment, because early this year the Home Secretary was quite concerned about the level of stop and searches, because I think there was about around 10% of people that were stopped and searched were only getting arrested or charged with offences. In this case, officers normally do have to have reasonable grounds. So we had the previous situation where you stop somebody in a car where you don't necessarily need reasonable grounds, but here you do normally need reasonable grounds. And this could be if they suspect an offence is being committed. For example, somebody may have a weapon in a car, etc. And in those circumstances, officers ought to have reasonable grounds, because the Home Secretary is quite concerned about the fact that, especially with people from black and ethnic minorities, I think a survey was done that they are 6 times more likely to be stopped than non-black and ethnic minority persons. And I think there's an ongoing review at the moment where officers are going to be trained and, if necessary, disciplined. So it's certainly a matter of concern, but really it boils down to having good reasons, and they can't just ordinarily stop somebody. They should have good reason. I think there's only one circumstance where officers can stop and search somebody without reasonable grounds, but that you have to have authority from a senior officer. So, for example, there may be, and you'll come across it before, there may be times when in a certain area there's some trouble going on and there's concern that certain groups might be causing trouble. So a senior officer may authorise a normal officer to stop and search people in the area.
Thank you. So, because we have talked about the police powers and these things.
Yes.
So when it comes to the trial, so some people watch on the television, on the shows. So how you see difference between television show drama shown on the real trial or in the real court? So what is the difference? How you see the difference?
I think the word drama is the word you touched on, because obviously there is an element of reality. Of course, there has to be an element of reality in a lot of the TV shows. However, because of the limited time scale, things are congested to have a lot of more entertainment. Unfortunately, it's not always as interesting as it appears on TV with programs, because you might have programs that are on for an hour or 2 hours, and we sometimes deal with cases that go on for 6 months, a year, and you may have trials that go on for 4 to 6 weeks, which are congested into probably half an hour of courtroom drama. But yeah, it's even interesting for us. Sometimes there's elements that are correct, but there's obviously other elements which are mere fantasy.
Thank you. So we have some few questions for you, which I will proceed quickly.
Yes.
So what are the rights of a witness, and if somebody has retracted from the statement given to the police officer during the investigation, what are the consequences of it?
Okay. The rights of a witness are taken very seriously, and ought to be taken very, very seriously. If a witness is reporting a matter to the police, then they ought to be treated with respect, and should be treated regardless of their race or sexual orientation, etc. So they must be treated with respect. If anybody believes that they haven't been treated with respect, or perhaps aren't happy with how an investigation is going, then they have a right to make a complaint. They should normally make that complaint in writing, and if they make the complaint to the police or in certain cases the Crown Prosecution Service, then they will get a full and detailed response. Dealing with the issue of a retraction statement, of course, that's a reality. Sometimes there are disputes involving family members or friends where witnesses initially give statements and then do not want to go ahead. Unfortunately, it's not a straightforward case, because once the case is in the hands of the Crown Prosecution Service in particular, and the matter's gone to court, where a lot of funds have been expended, the prosecution may feel it's in the public interest to proceed. If somebody does want to retract, though, what they initially better off doing is speaking to the officer in the case or the officer that's been dealing with them, explain the reasons why they want to retract. The reasons why somebody may want to retract is because it's a family or member or friend and they don't want to go through with it. They may be too nervous, but even if they're nervous, there are certain provisions which allow people to give evidence by a video link or even with screens. However, it's not cut and dry that if you don't want to go ahead and give evidence that the prosecution will withdraw the case because, as I said, the public interest is paramount.
Can the court issue a summon or a warrant for that witness?
Yes. What normally can happen is if a witness is reluctant to attend, the prosecution can apply to a court and ask for initially a summons. So a summons will be served upon a witness. If the witness fails to attend, then a court may issue a warrant. And obviously, if a warrant's issued, then a person can be detained and brought to court to give evidence. There are certain circumstances, however, where if somebody, for example, is too fearful to give evidence, their evidence can be read in their absence. But there has to be really good reason because they're afraid that they were threatened or they're too ill to attend, or sometimes medical evidence may need to be provided.
Thank you. If somebody is unfortunately arrested,
Yes.
What are the rights of a suspect, especially in the police custody?
Right. Normally, when somebody's arrested, you have to be booked in, and you're booked in by a custody sergeant. Theoretically, a custody sergeant is independent of the investigation team. He will give certain rights. So, for example, you have a right to independent legal advice. That means a lawyer. And in a police station, everybody will be glad to know it's free of charge. Whether you're a millionaire or you're you're unemployed, you're entitled to have a lawyer. A second right is that you've got a right to have somebody informed of your arrest. That will apply for perhaps 99% of the cases. So if you want your partner or your parent or a friend the police will normally inform them. And a third right that's available is the right to consult the rules and regulations, which are known as the codes of practice. So if you're having to wait and you're taken to a cell, you can read up what your rights are whilst at the police station. Also, I think it's really right to touch on this point, is that if there are issues with somebody's mental health, or somebody's 17 years or under, i.e. they're a child, then they've got the normal right to have an appropriate adult present at the police station during their interview. And finally, if you're unwell or ill, then you must let the custody officer know, and you have the right to be seen by a doctor or a other qualified practitioner.
This was Guest with Nazir. If you have any questions about the law, taxation, please do send me email. My email is shown on your screens. Mr. Rashid Majid, thank you very much for attending our show, and I hope in future you will also happy to join us, because our effort is to educate the people, educate the communities. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.